welcome. If anyone has still made it this far into the podcast, in all seriousness, if someone has actually if someone is still listening, like put your bank account or something in the comments, and I'll send you 10. Put your bank account, your password, everything in the comments, and we'll look after you.
This will be a good. In fact, if everyone who listens to this does that, that'll be a good indication of, if anyone's listening at all. Do you know of a Syrian justice? The eternal emperor of the universe, master of the stars and sky.
I don't know. I seem to remember there being like a relief or like a rock carving somewhere where, it's like essentially like a serious foreign policy where it's, the king's like sitting there, and then he's just got the severed heads of his enemies just lining the throne room. And then, some guy would come in, like a diplomat or whatever from Egypt, and he's like, yeah, come in, like, look at all my enemies here. What can I do for you?
Just so kind of like a doctor's office where it's just like, yeah, and, Sargon of Akkad, whatever, he'll see you shortly. Just make yourself comfortable in this room. And the room's just stone depictions of entire cities being washed away and
yeah. I mean,
under the foot of an immortal god king.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to imagine a rock carving of a city being washed away. I mean, the detail would be incredible.
Well, there's still lots of good photos and stuff of the reliefs at the London Museum. I imagine they used to be painted, but if you ever get a chance to look at those reliefs, every single one of those Assyrians, guards, emperors, all of them, they have the same stoic face, whereas everyone else, even the animals, look terrified.
Do you think that's because they were had a much higher psychopathic sort of, or?
I think it's just demonstrating. I think you're probably right, but it's just demonstrating to anyone who's there. It's just like, how do you like me now? Kind of like, we will do this.
Do you think they would have, when Assyria eventually fell, with the many times that it did, and the Babylonians or whoever came sort of rolling through and put them all to the sword, do you reckon they would have had the same blank looks in their face when they were getting stabbed, and when Nineveh was, up in flames? They're just like, huh. I feel nothing.
I reckon there would have been a lot of people sort of standing on their balconies looking down at the burning city or whatever, going, why me?
What have I done to deserve this? We were so friendly to everyone. We brought them civilization and they give us this.
It's like, how can I not be moral? Why would the gods give me all of this power and wealth if I wasn't a good guy? It's like, but good thing my library of clay tablets has now been cooked and preserved forever.
What, some wet clay tablets just lying around?
Yeah. Did you know about that?
No.
The great Xenophon, or whatever, the last Assyrian, the one who really fucked up. He had this great library, and it's, I think it's actually where we have found, we have our most complete copy of Gilgamesh and stuff like that. But, the best thing about, all your stuffs and clay, well, if it suddenly gets very hot and the whole city burns down, it's just kind of all preserved forever. So when the Brits eventually come along, a couple of thousand years later, and start digging up all this stuff, like, oh yeah, Nineveh and whatever, Like there are hundreds of thousands of clay tablets that are still untranslated because, I mean, it'd be like...
But wouldn't they already have been... Because isn't the whole point, like, you kind of make your cuneiform markings in the wet tablet and then stick it in the fire to harden it? So why wouldn't they already be hard? Like when the people came to destroy the...
My understanding is it's just harder.
Right.
But, I mean, because the fact there was hundreds of thousands of them left from, you know, Nineveh, it's really cool. It's just, there's only like, I don't know, a couple of dozen people on the planet that can translate it. It's a job for AI, you know, most of it's going to translate to, it's not going to be extra pages of, you know, Gilgamesh or anything like that. It's probably going to be like, you know, on this day, old mate had 3 sheep and he traded them for 4 cows. And I mean, that's a terrible trade, but you know what I mean.
Just the footnote will be, he got ripped off. History's first ever scam. One thing I do find very interesting, especially at the very ancient world, because, you know, the ancient world is it's a lot of it's a big time period, but I'd say the very, very ancient world is like it had this like a culture and a civilizational culture that was you know, obviously very old, like the Sumerians and Akkadians and Egyptians and you know, their culture comes from, like, you know, pick the date in prehistory, and that, you know. But one thing I've always, I don't know if you know much about it, but I've always thought it's really fascinating that for a very, very long time after that, people would look back at these cultures as like the guiding, you know, like the North Star of what they should be. And it's like cultural aspects had this currency for them that it's hard for us to sort of understand.
Is it kind of like, and I might get the order a bit wrong here, but if you go like Sumerians and then in the same place you've got like the Akkadians, and then the same place then you've got the Assyrians, but like it's sort of like the cultural inheritance over a couple of thousand years, where you'd still, like the Assyrians would still have stories and stuff that the Sumerians, and sort of cultural traditions and stuff. Like it's not, there's a through line, I guess.
Yes, exactly, and then, you know, it kind of carries on after that, you know, and you have the Assyrians and, you know, Babylonians and all these type of peoples, and then I guess the Persians come along, and in a way they kind of like reset things a little bit, and so a lot of people lose touch with like that really ancient stuff, and then Alexander comes through and sort of resets the Persian thing, and then people really do forget that, and then it's just like this continual thing of like...
Does it get Hellenized, that whole area, when Alexander comes through?
I think broadly speaking, yes. I mean, there's cities in, well, ruins or
in
towns
Afghanistan,
in Afghanistan, like called Alexandria and stuff, and
so fucking cool.
Yeah, like so there's like cool. an Acropolis or something in the middle of nowhere, like the desert of you know, up in the hills in Afghanistan.
Do you think there was ever a point in Alexander's glorious journey where the people he was with, like, you know, he's like, we're gonna fight, founding a city here. And at any point, do you think they all just like stopped asking him, like, what are we gonna call it? It's just like, it just sort of sees like, yeah, well, we've got another city, a town we're gonna start building. It's like, oh, let me guess, you know.
Ptolemy's like, oh, we could call it Ptolemy Polis. And Alexander's like, what a dumb name. He's like, let me think on it. I'll get back to you. He's like, we're naming it Alexandria. Cool.
Well, you know,
I guess when you are descended from a god and you're, king of the world.
And your
I guess you get your way a lot.
Yeah, well, your mother's a strange witch woman.
Yeah.
Is his relation to Zeus or is Achilles through his mum or Philip? Sorry, there's air quotes in that as well.
It's his relation. I haven't seen the family tree.
Yeah. I have a feeling it was through Olympia.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Because the Macedonians, I think they were sort of like the rest of the Greeks, particularly Thebes, probably did not have any feeling in their head like, yeah, Macedonians descended from Zeus. Yeah, okay, sure. They were like mountain barbarians.
Yeah, I think they thought they were more closely related to like dogs or... Goddamn dogs from up north.
Just the word barbarian sort of catch all is. Well, I know that this might be again a slight tangent, but are you a Thebes apologist, or do you think got what was coming?
Thebes, I don't know. I always think of ancient Greece as it might be to show my sort of, my depth of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I always just think Athens, Sparta.
Yeah.
And then, Thebes is kind of like, it's like a weird cousin or something,
Yeah.
that just shows up for Christmas and then you never hear of him again.
Yeah. It's like, you look at sort of the Greek city-states and sort of the little wars and stuff they have. It's almost like they'll build a city.
The small, pathetic wars.
They'll build a city over in Anatolia or something like that just for a generation later to go and fucking have a war with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think they'd still be like that even today. If they weren't so poor, they would be fighting each other.
But, okay, in the realm of, whatever realm we've stepped into now.
Yeah,
I'm of the opinion that we should reclaim Constantinople.
Who's we?
Christendom. The West. Greece. At least the Greeks, anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a interesting story about why it's not, why it's not a Greek city as we speak. It's a story that I don't know, so I won't. I did have getting back to the ancient stuff. I'm sure you've heard of Sargon II of Akkad.
Yes.
Widely thought to have created the very first empire or what you would call an empire in history.
Doesn't it say he's described as having 5,000 sort of boys, sort of like an army onward trainer, which you can imagine an army of 5,000 guys back then is just kind of like a really big football team, just sort of running around the place, terrorizing just boys.
I mean, more what I was going to say. It's obviously a bit of a hot topic now. The status of empires and are they good or are they bad? Big ups or big down? Big down.
Well, it just comes down to if isn't the definition of an empire an ethnic group having dominion over other ethnic groups?
I've no idea.
Well, it is, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
Depends what the ethnic group
Yes,
is.
well, some of them you wouldn't even bother.
I mean, we live in Australia, as people might be able to tell from our Tasmania, actually, from our accent. The secession's happening. 2030, let's...
Yeah, let me pronounce Hobart without a T, because Hobart. That's apparently what the retarded accent is.
So, would you say that because the majority of Australia are ethnically white, and they have dominion over, Aboriginals and all these Chinese people and stuff that move in. Is Australia an empire? We've got some territories around. There's we've got Christmas Island. We've got a couple of other places.
I think.
Is this the first Australian Reich?
Oh man, I wish. No, I don't know. I think the thing that probably stops that is because we're, under King Charles, and being subjects of him, I suppose it would make him an emperor.
So basically, any problems with empire throughout history, we can blame on King Charles III.
Ultimately, he's not my favourite monarch.
Yeah. So,
he's obviously God's not either, because he inherited it at the last 10 minutes.
So just to list off a couple of examples.
Yep.
The Roman Empire destroyed the Jewish temple.
Yep.
King Charles to blame?
To blame for that. Pretty funny.
Gotta blame someone.
Gotta blame someone.
The Romans aren't here anymore.
Well, that's funny you should say that. Funny.
Can't blame the Romans anymore. They're dead.
Well, I saw something, would have been like last year or whatever. It was one of it was either Eric or Brett Weinstein, and guessing by the last name, which sort of ethnic group they belong to. Anyway, he was talking about I don't know, Israel or whatever. It could have been even history, and I can't remember which Roman emperor it was that burnt the temple down. But as soon as his name came up mid-podcast, he's gone, it's just spat. It's just like, nah. So they're just spitting on that guy's name. Like, nah, still like, inside, at his computer chair, it's not Augustus, but it's just like, oh yeah, and Augustus, and he's like, it's like a spit on him.
I mean,
like, bloody hell.
2,000 years is a long time to hold a grudge.
It's well...
Especially when you weren't even there for it. I mean, essentially you just heard about it.
Look, 2,000 years. Yes, basically someone told him about it one day, and he's
it's like someone's. Hey, this temple was. It's like hey, a church on the other side of the country was was destroyed in an arson attack 1,000 years ago.
It's like, oh, you're ruffling up my yarmulke. But okay, if you can be sitting there spitting, because of the loss of the Second Temple 2,000 years later because of the Romans,
yeah,
I feel like you could have a little bit of leniency. Maybe if there was some sort of... I mean, they don't like getting called Christ killers, but that's a 2,000-year-old grudge. Think about it.
But on that, so the obviously the Israel or the Jerusalem at the time was within the Roman Empire, right? Within the, I think it was a client. I can't remember if it was directly administered or a client state, but were the Romans, seeing that it was within their territory, were they allowed to destroy it?
Well, yeah.
Like obviously Jewish people would say no, and they'd say roll up a newspaper and whack the emperor on the nose. Bad emperor.
Sure.
But like if you're if you're like the say the Cyrus the Great, the King of Kings of the Persian Empire, and everyone underneath you is your direct subject. If everyone is like not just your subject as in like I rule on behalf of the people, but it's like God has made me the emperor, and then just as I am beneath God, you are beneath. Can the emperor then just be like, well, I just want to kill some people, so you're kind of my property, so I'm gonna just kill you.
I have too many temples. The reason the Romans came down and destroyed the temple was because there was a massive Jewish revolt. There was like thousands of them, and Roman soldiers got killed, and then
So
they came
brought
back.
it on themselves.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm all for, right? I'm all for, like, let's say you've got an oppressed group of people, right? And your moment comes, and you organise, like the American Revolution, right? Who didn't necessarily think of themselves as Americans at the time, but, you know, they're revolting against the crown. God forbid that 3% tax, and, you know, the soldiers could stay in civilian homes and stuff like that, and whatever. The Americans, or the English, whatever you want to call the Anglos, had every right to go, piss off, George, don't want to deal with it anymore. If they didn't win, George could have come down there with the hammer and smited them all. You don't put up with that shit.
Yeah.
Fight for your freedom, but, you know, be aware if you lose, that's you're not going to get another shot at it.
I mean, I've always found that a bit. It's a funny sort of dichotomy, I get, because you know the biggest empire ever, the British Empire, obviously in World War II, fighting the Germans and you know, the Italians and the Japanese for. You could say that the Germans were just kind of like, hey, well, we're just doing the empire stuff that you're doing, so you know. But the British were like, no, freedom, like, you know.
Yep.
Well, that was a part of it anyway. Like, we can't have you taking over Poland. We can't have this, can't have that. We're going to fight you, whilst at the same time, you know, and then you know, they're like, you got to have your freedom. By the way, India, Australia, New Zealand, you have to send. You're part of us, so you got to send your boys in to fight for us, because you know.
Yeah. Well, there's freedom, and freedom. Well, I mean, like, I don't know. Like, I've had this argument with Dad before. It's not. It's like, and even Dan Carlin, you know, is talks about like slavery, right? There's many different kinds, you know, and it's like so. Sorry
to interrupt, but just should we set a rule whenever we mention Dan Carlin on this podcast? Should we mention or refer to him as the great Dan Carlin?
Yeah, right.
Agreed.
The great Dan Carlin.
Not Dan Carlin the great. The great Dan Carlin.
Great, capital G.
Yeah.
You know, slavery having different, you know, levels, and, you know, like there's like chattel slavery. Don't really want to be part of that one. You get your Spartacus slavery. Don't really want anything to do with that. You know, but getting kidnapped by Barbary, you know, pirates, also not good. But the English boast about ending the Atlantic slave trade. And that's very good of them, you know. No, you should be proud of that.
Yeah. Cold start.
I do think indentured servitude's pretty close, though. So, like, you're not necessarily... Like, slavery was outlawed in the empire.
Yeah.
But you could kind of get you to work against your will for 30 years to someone, and then at the end of that 30 years... They sort of go, well, good luck. Off you go.
Slavery's against it's outlawed, but you need to work in that factory for 14 hours a day, and, you know, we'll pay you $1.
You know, like,
feel free to go do something else if you want, but you can't do anything else, because if you do, we'll come and break your legs.
Yeah, exactly. You know. So, like, you know, even going through, like, my own family tree, and it's like, oh yeah, George and, you know...
Your family tree is pretty shifty.
It's fucking...
Pretty shady.
It's not good. It's not good. But, anyway...
I mean, your family tree's... All that needs to be said about Alex's family tree is that I'm pretty sure they're on the first fleet. Either the British were like, get this lot out of here, or they were, by this point, presumably hardened criminals, and they got shipped out, you know, as their punishment.
Oh, well, it's just, like, Yeah, he had it pretty good for a while, which, I mean, by British standards, old Joshua and his brother George were, sort of in one of those prison barges in the Thames. And then eventually they got moved to sort of like Bermuda and stuff, because they had other prison colonies and stuff there. And then they, I don't know, had a good idea to try and escape to the Americas, which didn't work, which got them sent to Tasmania. And when...
So the punishment they were in a prison colony in Bermuda.
Yep.
And they tried to escape to America.
Yep.
And the punishment for trying to escape a prison colony
Yep.
is to be sent to another prison colony.
Yep.
Even further from anything.
Yeah. And then we've come, he's come down, he's been at his indentured, he started his indentured servitude, and I think the other brother convinced the rest of the family that it was so shitty in England, you may as well just pack up and all voluntarily go to the penal island at the bottom of the world. And then they were just all indentured service. Because it's like, how do you pay for your transit?
Well,
you sell yourself for an indentured servitude.
Yeah, can't afford my bills. So you don't think the British were quite as successful at ending slavery as they made out?
I think they did a good job, but also ran into the little problem of, we don't want to pay them.
Do I need to take back my gold star?
No, I can look. At least the British version on abolishing slavery was, a little bit legalistic. Maybe change the term. Not quite as French as like, yeah, of course, liberty for everyone, and then immediately going, well, no.
Yeah, I feel like when they have those kind of liberty for everyone, there needs to be like some sort of like an asterisk, like liberty for everyone, as long as you're French.
Yeah.
Liberty for everyone. Hashtag French citizens.
Which again works really well for the French, because if it's not like you're in Australia, you don't become English because you're a part of sovereign or under the protection of the sovereign. Whereas if the French still had their monarchy, it's just like, congratulations, you're all French now.
Can I tell you a funny story about the French liberty? I can't remember if I've told you before, but obviously the French Revolution and the various sort of republics and empires and stuff they went through since, and it has to have like a impact on like the national psychology, and how you interact with each other as a society, right? So they're quite liberty for everyone. It's just small government, that kind of stuff. So
it's where all those shit ideas came from.
So I think about like 10, 15 years ago, the French government decided as like a revenue raising thing or something, that they were going to put all these speed cameras on all these highways throughout France, all these freeways throughout France. Massively unpopular, like hugely unpopular, as it would be anyway. Yeah. Like, so hugely unpopular. And it had never been told or anything, these roads.
They just rolled it out.
So they put all these speed cameras in, or I can't remember if they were speed cameras or just tolls.
Yeah.
But either way, you get. And it's hugely unpopular. And like we would in Australia or, England or wherever, there was no petitions, there was no lobby the government or anything like that. The French people just went and destroyed every single one of those cameras, set them on fire, don't know what, just destroyed them all throughout the country. And the government was like, yeah, we're just not going to replace them.
There's ones in the UK in this like, you can't have, like, if you enter certain areas with a certain car or whatever, it's an extra toll charge. Same thing. That was earlier this year, just people just broad daylight, like dude said, with an angle grinder, cutting the pole down, sort of waves at the it's like thing falls over and he just sort of like puts it back in his bag and
what a way to end.